When we talk about the 1% and the wealth gap, the conversation usually revolves around what feels fair, but fairness is entirely subjective. To actually address economic inequality, or even agree that a crisis exists in the first place, we need an objective, mathematical standard of measurement. Take South Africa, a country where the divide between the rich and the poor is stark and highly visible. Compare that to a country like Slovakia, where wealth is distributed much more evenly across the population. How do we mathematically compare the two? In 1912, an Italian statistician named Gini developed a method to capture an entire nation's messy distribution of wealth and compress it down into a single number between 0 and 1. By translating a highly charged political issue into cold math, he created a concrete tool to hold governments and economic systems accountable. This graph shows exactly how that math works. The x-axis ranks the population from poorest to richest from 0 to 100%. The y-axis tracks the cumulative share of the total income those people earn. If a society shared every dollar completely evenly, we would draw a perfectly straight 45-degree diagonal line right through the middle. Along this line, the bottom 20% of the population holds exactly 20% of the wealth. The bottom 50% holds 50%, and so on. This baseline of perfect distribution represents a theoretical Gini score of 0. But real-world economies never plot a perfectly straight line. Instead, the actual wealth distribution sags downward, forming what economists call the Lorenz curve. Notice the geometric area trapped between that perfect diagonal line and the sagging Lorenz curve, and the total area underneath. To find the Gini coefficient, you simply take the area of that trapped gap and divide it by the total area under the perfect line. The deeper the curve sags toward the bottom of the graph, the closer the final score gets to 1. A score of 1 mathematically represents a society where a single person hoards everything and everyone else has absolutely nothing. So how do modern nations actually stack up against each other using this formula? This map plots global Gini coefficients by country, and it reveals how different regions group together on the scale. The United States hovers around a 0.4, indicating high inequality, while Northern European nations generally sit much lower, in the 0.2 range. To understand why those numbers differ, we must distinguish between market income, what people earn before taxes, and disposable income, the money they actually take home after taxes and welfare. In the United States, the pre-tax Gini score is a highly unequal 0.60, but once progressive taxes and social safety nets are applied, that curve shifts upward, dropping the final score to 0.44. This mathematical shift proves that extreme inequality is not an unavoidable law of nature. It is a deliberate policy choice that governments have the mechanical ability to correct. But despite its elegance, the Gini coefficient has a critical mathematical blind spot that can hide the actual human reality of an economy. Two completely different Lorenz curves can intersect while containing the exact same total area. Because the areas are equal, the scores are identical. A society with a crushed lower class can score 0.5, just like a society with a hyper-rich top 1%. Because the Gini calculation is highly sensitive to the middle of the income spectrum, it struggles to differentiate between these qualitatively different kinds of inequality. To account for this, economists use a dashboard of supplementary metrics to look closely at the extremes. They use decile ratios, which compare the top 10% directly to the bottom 10%, or the Atkinson Index, a metric that can be adjusted to heavily weigh the bottom of the income distribution. The Gini coefficient is not a flawless reflection of human thriving, but it remains our most universally understood 30,000-foot view. Understanding this single mathematical ratio is the essential first step to mapping the landscape of global disparity. It provides the baseline we need to track whether the gap between the rich and poor is widening, or if it is finally starting to close.